Yeah. Good afternoon, friends. So we'll start this fourth lecture. Just let me tell you that at the end of this lecture, there will be some announcements. So Dr. Basu will tell at that time. Okay. So in this series of lectures on inelastic neutron scattering and quasi-elastic neutron scattering, we had an introduction for the first two lectures. And in the third lecture, that was the last one, we did the lattice dynamics theory. And in today's one, we will talk about how to really make the measurements, inelastic neutron scattering measurements of phonons from a single crystal and so on. So let's quickly go through review the previous lecture. Okay, we said there were two different kinds of dynamics and computational models are very important. We also said that for phonons, for the concept of phonons, these are the essential approximations, namely the adiabatic approximation and the harmonic approximation. And with some relaxation, we also have the quasi-harmonic approximation. So, and so you have essentially phonons describing small amplitude vibrations about the equilibrium positions. And these act as independent simple harmonic oscillators, and their energies are quantized. Okay, if we express the atomic positions in terms of a wave-like solution, and which is possible because of the periodic nature of the crystal. So because of the periodicity, we can make use of this kind of an expansion. In that case, we have an amplitude term which describes the displacement pattern involved with these vibrations. We'll come to a little more. I'll revise this part again. Okay. So, okay, and then we set up from the equation of motion the so-called dynamical matrix, which is essentially composed of the second-order force constant tensors and the solutions of these dynamical matrix by diagonalizing it.
To write up.
Yeah, I'll do that now. I'll come to the next one. Yeah. Okay. So now let's try to understand what are these 3n eigenvalues and 3n eigenvectors. So, okay. Very good. So see what happens is here, let's say there are n atoms. Very good. Yeah. So you see there are, let's say, n atoms in the primitive cell. Oh, that's going up. Close. Okay. No, why this top thing should not come? Fine. So you see there are n atoms in the primitive cell. Okay, so fine. I think this much you would understand. And so then the number of degrees of freedom in the corresponding to the n atoms is 3n. Okay. Having said that, corresponding to these 3n degrees of freedom, what we have is 3n normal modes or equivalent of 3n simple harmonic oscillators, each having a frequency omega j, and where j goes from 1 to 3n. Okay. Now this omega j is a function of the wave vector. All right. So these are the square root of the eigenvalues. The eigenvalues are actually omega square. So we take the square root and assuming that these omega j squares are all positive values for a stable normal mode. So these are the frequencies. Okay, now for corresponding to each frequency, we have what we call the eigenvector. So J and Q, these are essential requirements, and then the atom K. Okay, let's understand it a little better. What are these? So this J is corresponding to which phonon frequency I'm talking about. But then this vector itself is a 3n dimensional vector. And its components are you can say, let's put x of k equal to 1, y of k equal to 1, z of k equal to 1, then x of k equal to 2, y of k equal to 2, z of k equal to 2, and so on and so forth. At the end, we have x for k equal to n, y of k equal to n, and z of k equal to n. So you can see that these are 3n dimensional or 3n values, and these are x, y, z are the amplitudes of the vibration in the three directions, x, y, z direction for the atom number 1. Okay, so for the first atom, these are the three amplitudes along the x, y, z directions, which can be positive or negative. And for the second atom and so on and so forth. There can also be a phase term. So in that sense, these numbers are not necessarily all real numbers. They can be complex numbers because the atom 1 and atom 2 may not be exactly in phase. It may or may not be totally out of phase. So in general, this is possible. So it's a complex vector of 3n dimensions and giving the values of the displacements of all the atoms in the primitive cell. Okay, and now there is such an eigenvector for each of the frequencies, each of the 3n frequencies. All right, so now that is a general concept. Let's see how this translates for a simple structure. So, okay, so I'll erase off this totally first. Yes, and let's look. Yeah, again, very good. Yeah. Okay. So suppose my n is only one atom. Then anyway, that means there are three frequencies. Your 3n is equal to 3. And so there are three frequencies. Omega j of q and j equal to 1, 2, 3. So omega 1, 2, 3. Fine. So these are actually three acoustic modes, what we normally, plot it like. So that's a direction q vector, and the three modes may look like this. Sometimes two of them may be degenerate, having the same frequency. Often these are longitudinal and transverse modes. Okay, that is the value of the frequency. Okay, so now let us say what will the eigenvectors be? At the zone center, for the acoustic modes, these atoms all move, but there is the zero equal displacement for all the atoms, or in this case, there is only one atom. So there is some displacement. And as we go further, the displacements are there. Anyway, there is only one atom, so there is nothing much you can do here. Except that for longitudinal mode, and if suppose the q is in the direction parallel to the x direction, then for longitudinal mode, it may be like 1, 0, 0, which means the x displacement is 1, the others are 0. For transverse modes, it could be 0, 1, 0 and 0, 0, 1. Okay, so that's simple. These are the eigenvectors. Now, if you have two atoms, n equal to 2 atoms in the unit cell, then 3n is equal to 6. And you have now the six modes. So you can have these 3 modes, and there are also 3 optic modes. Okay. Once again, one of them may be longitudinal optic mode, and other 2 may be transverse optic modes. Okay, these are longitudinal, acoustic and optic modes. Let's say for the so now the eigenvector has to be a 6-dimensional eigenvector. So for the acoustic modes, the 2 atoms move in phase. So for the first atom is 1, 0, 0, second atom is also 1, 0, 0. That will be the longitudinal acoustic mode. For transverse acoustic mode again, it may be again the 2 atoms are in phase. So okay, yes, we join it. This is a 6-dimensional vector, and so on. Okay. Now for the optic mode, the eigenvectors, as you would have learned, the 2 atoms move out of phase with respect to each other. So it will be like 1, 0, 0 and minus 1, 0, 0. Okay. And similarly for the transverse optic modes. Okay. Now here I should tell 2 things. See, normally we write the eigenvectors which are normalized. So therefore, but you can see this vector, 6-dimensional vector, is not normalized. It's the sum of square of all the elements comes out 2. So to normalize it, I will divide it by square root of 2, and so then the normalized vector will be there. So but right now, don't worry about normalization. That is important when we try to do any quantitative calculation. But this is essentially to tell you what are this eigenvector will tell the direction of the displacement and also the phase relation between different atoms. That is one. What I have written here is not okay. That's one part. Second, the eigenvectors which I have listed here actually correspond to near q equal to 0. Okay, it's only that, for example, you might remember a diatomic chain that you might have studied, the phonons in a diatomic chain. You have something like this, a diatomic, one-dimensional diatomic chain. So there are only 2 atoms, and we find that there's an acoustic mode, there's an optic mode, and then these are there is some band gap depending on the mass of the 2 atoms being different. So here the 2 atoms move parallel to each other. Here they are out of phase. So let's say, okay, that means corresponding to 1 and minus 1. Here both are 1 and 1. But as we go here, we know that here only 1 atom moves, the other atom does not. And for the other one, it is like this. Okay, so the heavier atom moves in the lower mode and the lighter atom moves in the upper mode. And that's just the frequencies are different because of the masses involved, although the force constant is the same. Now, okay, we may still write it like this, but if I multiply it with the phase factor, then it will so happen that the phase factor for the second atom will take it from phase going from 1 to 0. And in the other case, it will be the other way. So the phase factor is also important. We will not go into further details here. But so the main idea is that from this analysis, we get the normal mode frequencies and normal mode eigenvectors, and the eigenvectors give you the displacement pattern. Okay, you include all the phase factors or whatever that are required. That comes out in an actual calculation. And when you try to do this, there are also other things like group theory is important. What the group theory does is Actually, maybe some of these things I will clarify again in the tutorial session. So right now, let me not go further into details of various other aspects. It's sufficient to just let you know that what these eigenvectors and eigenvalues mean. Okay, so we'll go back to the our. And if you have any specific questions, then please let me know so that I can take care of those in the during the tutorial day. Okay, so this is again essentially telling the same thing, that the eigenvector is a 3n dimensional vector giving the displacements, which means the magnitude and phase of all the atoms. And then there are so many modes which happen to be fairly complex. Okay, there are acoustic and optic modes and so on. Yeah, then what we okay, there are a variety of modes that we have to worry about. Right. So now today we will go into the measurements of the phonon dispersion curves. And as I said, the fact that you want to measure the dispersion of the curve, which is that is the frequency as a function of wave vector. And so a wave vector you can define only when you have a single crystal. If you have a polycrystalline sample, then the direction, there are all kinds of crystallites oriented differently. And so you cannot define a single direction there. What you get there is an average information called the phonon density of states. So we are today going to talk about the measurement of the phonon dispersion curves using a single crystal. Okay. So now this picture you had seen in the first lecture. What you essentially have here is the incident neutron energy and wavelength. Neutron energy and the wavelength means the wave vector direction, and so also in the outgoing direction. And the energy difference gives you the energy of the excitation, and the wave vector difference gives you the wave vector of the excitation again, which is Q. Now, if the sample is a crystal, then this wave vector can be written down in terms of a reciprocal lattice vector and a wave vector inside the first Brillouin zone. Okay. See, otherwise your Q could be any value, but if it's larger than the first Brillouin zone, then you take out the first Brillouin zone values. So again, let me just mention it here. Okay. So you see, suppose I have a reciprocal lattice, which is yeah, I have a reciprocal lattice. Let's say these are the points. Something like that. Let's say this is a vector A star. Okay. This may be the vector B star, and then you also have a C star. These are the reciprocal lattice vectors. And we have a Brillouin zone, which is, you can take something like this. That would be your Brillouin zone. So the points which are inside the Brillouin zone, those can be the vector Q. Okay. Now, if your capital Q is, for example, this number, then this could be written in terms of some reciprocal lattice vector minus a small vector. So let's say this is Q plus a small q, and this vector can be a vector G. So that is a reciprocal lattice vector. In this case, it is 1, 0, 1, 1, 0. Okay, and that is the vector that you actually measure. And so assign it a small q. This would be the measurement. So that is how it is done. Okay. So now let's get back. I mean, see, how, the main problem here is that how do I identify the issue is that suppose you have so many phonons. How do I select? And as I said, these are all measured one by one. So how do I choose? Suppose I want to measure this phonon. How do I measure this phonon? Or how do I measure this phonon? And so on. So that is the main idea. So what we do, we look at the dynamical structure factors because we know that the measured intensity of the scattered neutrons is proportional to the dynamical structure factor. And so now dynamical structure factor, which is, as we said, is a Fourier transform of the position time correlation function. This is just the final expression that is relevant here. So the dynamical structure factor for the coherent scattering, because as we are looking at the collective dynamics involving more than one atom, we have to use the coherent scattering factor, coherent structure factor, and that is proportional to this expression. Very clearly, this has to have the energy and wave vector conservation, because then only you can have the finite intensity. So whenever these conditions are satisfied, you get a peak in the dynamical structure factor. In actual practice, it is not just a delta function, but it is broadened by the resolution function of the instrument. So instead of omega being at omega q, there will be some width associated with it, because my instrument will actually measure not only omega, but a small window d omega around omega. So that gives me the a possibility of seeing the phonons within that window. So so there is a resolution in the energy. There is also a resolution in the wave vector. Then there's another term, which is the phonon population term. So as you said, it's each vibration is an independent simple harmonic oscillator, and the population of that oscillator is important, and the intensity will be proportional to how many phonons are populated. Okay, so that depends on the temperature. So that's a standard term for the, this follows the Bose-Einstein statistics. And so you have, at the lowest temperature, you have the 0 point energy, and so this half corresponds to the 0 point energy. And then in this n is the average population number. You also have either n plus 1 or n only, because there are two kinds of processes. One, neutron energy gain, in which the neutron gains energy, which means it absorbs a phonon, existing phonon, and gains energy. Other is the neutron loses energy. That means neutron loses energy and it creates a phonon. Here there is a mistake. It should have been minus plus, in the sense that when neutron loses energy, it creates a phonon, and that has a higher probability. So this the probability that is used here, that will come here, is n omega plus 1. Okay. So the plus corresponds to neutron energy loss. What I've written here is the other way. So for neutron energy loss, it is plus, and for neutron energy gain, it is minus. And our convention is also like that. But we take omega as positive when the neutron loses energy. So that's what. If EI minus EF is positive, EI is more than EF, that means the neutron starts with a higher energy and loses energy and creates a phonon. Okay, so that's just the intensity, the population term. And then there is a one phonon structure factor. So remember, this is we call the dynamical structure factor, and then we call we have a phonon structure factor. Now this is a one phonon structure factor. In principle, you can have multi-phonon processes. Means more than one phonon can be either created or annihilated. So, but this we are looking at one phonon structure factor now because okay, this usually has a much higher at under favorable conditions of the wave vector and temperature. The intensities for one phonon structure factor or the intensity for the one phonon structure factor is larger than a multi-phonon. But yes, in some lecture we will come to this aspect again. So let's for the time being assume that we are looking at one phonon processes. Now the one phonon structure factor again, so this is now a function of only the wave vector transfer. And this looks like this. What it has got, okay, it has a phase term for different atoms. This also has, this is a Debye-Wohler factor. Now, Debye-Wohler factor occurs in the diffraction also, and so also here. The reason the Debye-Wohler factor occurs is the following: that if you have an ideal perfect crystal with all the atoms located at their equilibrium positions, and then you have a perfect crystal. Okay, there's a perfect periodicity, and the Debye-Wohler factor will be simply 1. That is, this total term will be 1. This particular part will be 0. So fine. However, in practice, at a finite temperature, the atoms are vibrating, and so there is no atom actually located at the minimum energy at the average position. Okay, so in that sense, if you take the actual positions of all the atoms, we don't even have a periodicity because distance between different atoms will be all different. However, there is an average average structure is crystalline. Let's just look at it a little carefully. Okay, so okay, now let's see if the atom is exactly located here, and these are the periodicities. Then okay, and let me just say what the Debye-Wohler factor is. This is actually okay. This is the vibrational amplitude. Okay, so if at a small temperature, assuming there is no 0-point motion, if U is 0, then anyway that becomes 1. So there is no issue. But however, in practice, these atoms are all vibrating. Suppose this is this atom is at this position, this atom might be at this position. They're all vibrating. Okay, within a thermal range. So this is vibrating within a range. So now so this is the mean amplitude, you can say, the average value of U square. So that is the main culprit, that you have a thermal cloud or describing the position of every atom, and the larger the temperature, larger is the U square. The structure is away from a perfect crystalline structure, and therefore the intensities of everything that comes from the periodicity or perfect crystalline structure will be reduced, and so that is how the Debye-Wohler factor is applied. In fact, that's an interesting term here. Let me just say e to the power, okay, let's just write e to the power minus WQ, e to the power WQ. Okay, that's 1. I can also write it like this, e to the power minus WQ. Okay, now this curve, actually some simplification, we can also write it as e to the power minus 1/3. Okay, this actually there's a half here. So it becomes 1/6 times q square u square. Okay, assuming that we just take a spherical average here. In practice, one probably has to take, one has to take the proper directions, and this is not all a spherical term. Usually we call it a thermal ellipsoid, which means it's ellipse. The next approximation is it is not a sphere but an ellipsoid, but it could be even a more complex behavior. But for simplification, let's take this kind of a picture. Then this I could express as 1 plus, or maybe I could just write it directly like this. If I have okay, so you need so the total term will be actually like this, and if I expand it like this, this actually will this turns out to be corresponding to the what you observe in diffraction. So in diffraction intensity, you have whatever you terms you get from the structure factor and multiply with the de Broglie factor. This term actually corresponds to one phonon term. And then further terms correspond to higher phonon terms. So that is how, compared to the structure factor for diffraction, the structure factor for a one phonon process has this kind of additional term here. Okay. So the one phonon structure factor is composed of so many terms. You have the de Broglie factor, you have the phase term, and these are the only two terms that occur in a one phonon, the structure factor corresponding to the diffraction. Okay. However, for the phonon, we have this additional term, and that is the q dot xi. That means the dot product of the wave vector and the eigenvector. So there is a key difference compared to the diffraction intensities. The q dot xi, that is the okay. So that's the main important term, and then of course you have the neutron scattering length. If you had the X-ray, then this would be a form factor and so on. And there is also a mass term here, because heavier atoms will have a smaller amplitude. So this is essentially normalization because coming from the mass terms. Okay, so this is just repeating the one phonon structure factor. So the key to measurement of different phonons actually lies in this term. Different phonons can be separated because so that if they have a different dot product between the wave vector and the eigenvector. So the intensity is due to component of the eigenvector, which is along the wave vector transport. Now, the simplest thing we can look at it, for example, if I have a longitudinal phonon, then that means for the longitudinal phonon, as we said, the eigenvector is parallel to the phonon wave vector. Okay, if the eigenvector is parallel to phonon wave vector, then we say it's a longitudinal phonon. If the eigenvector is perpendicular to the phonon wave vector, then we call these transverse phonons. So if xi is parallel to q, and q has xi also has to be parallel to capital Q, that means the small q, capital Q, and g, they should all be parallel to each other. They may not be identically, there may be some small components away from being parallel, but yes, ideally to measure a longitudinal phonon, we should choose those values of capital Q and G which are parallel to the small q. Okay. On the other hand, for a transverse phonon, we should choose the Q and G such that they are perpendicular to Q. Okay, now this is little better explained here. Okay, so we said Q is parallel to xi of Q, the eigenvector, K is that particular atom. So for a longitudinal phonon, Q and small q and G, they are all parallel. Okay, so if we have such a configuration, we would be measuring a longitudinal phonon. Could be longitudinal acoustic or longitudinal optic. That again will come separately. If it's a transverse phonon, then the G, which is a reciprocal lattice vector, is perpendicular to the small q and the capital Q. Usually the small q is much smaller in length because it is within a Brillouin zone, whereas capital G can be much longer because this could correspond to several reciprocal lattice vectors. So for example, G could be 400 and small q could be 0.10 or something like that. Okay. Now, of course, these are two ideal conditions. In general, the measurements are not necessarily made under these ideal conditions. It could be a more general one, and that is because we have a large number of phonons and we have to kind of optimize where to measure, and also depends on where the intensities are maximum and so on. So there are general directions also chosen. Okay, so what is the summary of this discussion? So in general, vibrations need not be purely along or perpendicular to the wave vector Q. That means they need not be pure longitudinal or pure transverse. Now that happens when you have a very large number of phonons. See, we could talk of pure longitudinal or pure transverse when we had, let's say, just 2 atoms in the unit cell, or otherwise you have to have more options. So there are modes which are all different kinds. And so now what do? We actually calculate using a model of lattice dynamics the phonon eigenvectors. And once we have a calculation of the phonon eigenvectors, then we can calculate the one phonon structure factors. And having calculated the one phonon structure factors at a large number of G values. So what I mean is we calculate the one phonon structure factors at for a given small q, but at a large number of capital G. That means several reciprocal lattice vectors. Okay, let's see what this means. See, for example, you have okay, this is my, let's say, the reciprocal lattice, and I'm interested in measuring, let us say, this small q. Okay, I could measure here. I could also measure here. I could also measure here. This will all be small q will be the same. But the capital Q, I can have this as my capital Q, or I could have this as my capital Q. So the G will be different, but small q will be all, okay, I should probably draw the other way here. A small q can be like this, and therefore this is G, and minus Q is equal to capital Q. Okay, G minus Q equal to capital Q. So I can, for the same value of small q, I can choose a large number of arbitrary G values, and I should expect the same frequency, provided okay, I mean, the various phonons that correspond to this Q will be measured. And so what we do is we calculate the structure factors corresponding to different Q. And so you can tabulate something like, let's say, so different values of Q can be listed and the corresponding values for the, and then we can choose where, for example, we get the best, highest intensity or the best intensity, we can measure it according to that. So I can go and measure in different Brillouin zones. So usually that is what is done, and that is how you identify different. You can measure the phonon frequencies. You don't measure in the only in the first Brillouin zone or in any particular Brillouin zone. Okay. Now this is bit about the experiment. Well, this also you had seen earlier. That is the schematic of a triple axis neutron spectrometer. You have the monochromator, sample, and the analyzer, and you have this. Okay, so if I write this vector ki, which is along this direction, and the magnitude equal to 2 pi by lambda, and similarly the vector kf is along this direction and has a magnitude 2 pi by lambda again corresponding to the scattered neutron. And then there's a vector diagram that is ki and kf, and the difference vector is q. So you have ki, kf, and q is what is of interest to us. Okay, and it is the q which we try to relate with some g and some small q. Now, in actual practice, we can do scans in many ways. Usually there are two kinds of scans. You can do a constant Q scan or a constant energy scan, or you can scan in any path in the Q energy space. Quite often the experiments are done such that the incident energy is kept fixed, because changing this energy is a more cumbersome process. And we only do most of the time, only analyze the scattered neutron energies. Okay, you can do it the other way also, but one of the two things are kept constant during a scan. Okay, it's all right. Let's see. So, okay, these are the same basic equations. As far as energy is concerned, yes, that's the term. Energy is equal to h cross square k square divided by 2m. Okay, so that is how the vector diagram is there. You have a vector ki and a vector kf and the vector q. And the vector q, it could be some vector small g, vector capital G and the small q. Okay, and now, so that is a picture in the reciprocal space, giving the direction of different vectors. Now, so how do we go about doing a scan? Here, now you can see that the variables of interest to us are omega, that is the energy difference. And you also have let's say, this vector q. Often we do a measurement in a given plane. So that means the x and y component of the vector q are of interest. The z component is just is out of the plane of the spectrometer. So the crystal is oriented in some particular way, but anyway, so there is no component chosen outside the plane of the spectrometer. So these are the three quantities of interest to us, qx, qy, and omega. So what we do is we scan one of them and keep the other two constant. Okay, so I can scan one of them. Let's say I can scan maybe just, so I can choose a direction in, so that's why we can scan with one of them. In a constant Q scan, the entire vector Q is kept constant, and therefore you scan only omega. The only variable is omega, Qx and Qy are kept fixed. Okay, you can scan omega by, and again, as I said, if you keep the Ki fixed, then the only thing you keep the Ki fixed, you keep the vector Q fixed, then what you can change? You can change the direction of Ki and you can change the magnitude of Kf and direction. That means you can change this particular angle here, theta s, that is the scattering angle, and the wavelength of the outgoing beam. Okay, so in general, we have the variables which are in the instrument are the magnitude of Ki, the magnitude of Kf, the scattering angle theta s, and also the angle psi. That is, angle psi is it essentially is the orientation of the wave vector with respect to the x direction, which means essentially it's orientation of the crystal. So you have what are the variables? The magnitude of that incident wave vector, which means the wavelength of the incident neutron, the magnitude of the scattered wave vector, which means the magnitude of the scattered wavelength, the scattering angle, that is angle between Ki and Kf, and the psi, which is the orientation of the single crystal. So these four variables are there. And what we do is that you can, because you are interested in all three, so normally we can keep one of these constant, and we can allow vary the other three. And in actual practice, we can keep, in fact, two of these things constant and vary only one of them. So let's say, to summarize here, in the measurements of phonon dispersion relation, either EI or EF are kept fixed. The scattering angle between Ki and Kf is varied, and the orientation of the crystal is also varied. And then we have two kinds of scans. We can do either a constant Q scan, which means the scan is performed as a function of E, or the energy transfer, or that means only the Kf. Or we can do a constant energy scan, in which case the scan is performed as a function of Q, which means we keep everything constant, but only change the direction of Q, only change the magnitude of Q, keep even the direction constant. So these constant E or constant Q scans, these are the two kinds of scans that we normally work with. And how do I choose the value of capital Q or G is usually through some calculation. So that for each phonon, I have a calculation done at a large number of G values and choose an appropriate G where I can expect very good intensity. Okay. Yes. All right, that I'll come to a little later. Is there anything more? Any questions or something at this stage? Perhaps none. Okay, in that case, this will clarify again. I will just like to talk about experimentally how can I measure the eigenvector. So, well, you see, experimentally, how do you measure, you already know, how do we measure the structure of, or how do we determine the structure of a crystal? What we do is we measure the intensities corresponding to different reciprocal lattice vectors. That means the intensities of various Bragg reflections, various HKL, and then do a fitting. We can fit it to a model of the crystal structure. Okay, that is what is normally done in diffraction. You have intensities as a function of G, and you fit it to a structure. It is very similar if you want to experimentally determine the eigenvector of a phonon. What we do is we can measure the structure factor, or one phonon structure factor for a large number of G values. Okay, and then I can do a fitting to the eigenvector. So essentially it's the same process, although it's not very often done, because for each phonon intensities are usually much less than diffraction intensities. To give you an idea, the phonon intensities are typically 2 orders of magnitude smaller than diffraction intensities. And that's the major difficulty. And so this is done very rarely that but that would be the process. But when we try to determine a phonon eigenvector, we should already know what the crystal structure is. And again, as in case of a crystal structure, we start with the known structure and then refine it, like in a ritual refinement or refinement for measurements for a single crystal. Here, these are also measurements for a single crystal, and so we start with some values of the eigenvector and then refine it. Okay, so that is what is done. Okay. All right. So next lecture we will go into polycrystalline samples. So I will close it here. If there are any specific questions or something, do you have something? And you can call Dr. Basu. Yes. How do we guess G? Okay, great. Yes, so let's come back to the right. Yeah, Basu. I'll just answer a question and then come back. Yeah, okay, this is relevant, but yeah. How do you guess G? See, the okay, let me give you. So you see, we have the structure factor. Okay, now the point is what kind of values I should start with. There are a number of things. See, you can see here one thing. Suppose it's a very simple structure and Q is parallel to Xi. Okay, if Q is parallel to Xi, this term becomes 1 or a constant, and therefore my structure factors will be directly proportional to the Bragg structure factors. Okay, so yes, I have to. I want to go back here. Yeah. Okay. So you see what we had, the one for one structure factor f of q is like a term q dot xi, and you also have the terms which you have. Okay, and this is sum over all atoms. So a simple case, suppose q is parallel to xi, which is suppose it is possible. Okay, that you know that is a longitudinal phonon, then you can choose q. Then if this is 1, this would be very similar to f of g corresponding to the Bragg. So that means for simple phonons, the values of G which gives a good Bragg intensity will also give good phonon intensities. Right? So that's one way of looking at it. However, so that is usually the case. So quite often, let's say G equal to 400, this is jumping somewhat, but it happens to be, seems to work in a large number of structures. We can have this. And for a longitudinal phonon, I can measure it at, let's say, 4.100. And then I can expect a good intensity. Similarly, I can measure at 0.10 and get a transverse phonon. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I look at the good structure factors for the Bragg intensity, and one could measure along those ones. On the other hand, if there are optic phonons, you see this would work in the acoustic phonons well. In optic phonons, let's say for atom k equal to 1 and k equal to 2, they will have the phase term which is opposed to each other. So there, quite often it so happens that, that is for the, you can say, the acoustic. For optic modes, I would measure it, let's say 500, for example, where the Bragg intensity is 0 or negligible, but then they will give you good intensity for optic modes. So a simple thumb rules are in simple structures are that acoustic modes are best measured around good Bragg intensity points, and optic modes are best measured around poor Bragg intensity points. Okay, but in general, for a more complex structure, I would actually do a calculation from lattice dynamics and calculate the phonon structure factors, and then make a list of what are the good values of G where to measure it. Okay, I hope this answers. If there are any further questions, we will go into these kind of things more detail in the tutorial session.